There was a man who appeared with every sunset, but his appearance didn't match him at all. He was pale-faced and cold, and seemed so transparent, as if he were about to disappear. It was as if he was not of this time, a man who had lost his name. 2 years ago in the library, the protagonist ran into him in the rays of the setting sun. She can't forget that encounter to this day. Ron called out to Kate, and she apologized for dozing off a little. The boy took care of her because he was afraid that she had another nightmare. The girl said that everything was fine and that there was no reason for him to worry. The girl started to fix Ron's crib, but suddenly felt a strange feeling. Ron said that he was on his way out, and Kate wished him a good journey. Kate didn't understand what was wrong with her. The girl flopped down on the bed with thoughts that she felt nauseous just looking at him. Ron blank. This was her current husband. The guy was thoughtful, handsome. To this day, Kate doesn't understand why he married her, since he's an assistant to a famous dressmaker and quite successful. And he actually loves her sister, Rosalind. Ron has never said such a thing to his wife, Kate, but the attention has always bypassed her. Ever since she was a child, her father had loved Rosalind, while Kate had never been paid attention to. And there was only one reason. Kate's mother died right after she was born. The girl's older sister asked why Mom didn't wake up after she gave birth to her sister. Such were the reasons for Kate's hatred of her. Always when the girl couldn't do something, she was told to look at her sister. Kate was called the disgrace of the family, and her father didn't understand how he could even have a daughter like that. He would tell her to get out if she couldn't do anything. Kate realized that even if she died, they all wouldn't care. And living like that, day after day, she met a man in the library, and Kate really liked his hair. It looked just like snow. Looking at the guy, the girl became fascinated and dropped the book. The girl immediately woke up and didn't realize what she was doing and tried to pick up as soon as possible. But suddenly she felt the hand of this man who decided to help her. And she said thank you for that. But it was very difficult for her because she was nervous because she didn't know how to communicate. Kate stood with that book in her hands, clutching it to her because she was very embarrassed. It was her story of falling in love. After that, she went to the library for 6 months to meet him again. But never once had she even made eye contact with him, just watching him reading from the corner of her eye. The strange thing was that the expression on his face hadn't changed at all. It seemed to her that he was always frowning. Listening to his voice was Kate's favorite because she thought it was very beautiful, and she was mortified every time. But one day, 6 months later, he didn't show up, even though he used to come every day. Kate was very disappointed when she began to realize that she probably wouldn't see him that day. The guy was not there for a few days, and Kate was already starting to worry. Suddenly, the girl heard a strange story. A man asked her if she was telling the man with silver hair. Kate nodded in response, and the man said that the guy was dead, Edwin Arthur Vond. Kate did not learn his name until the funeral. He was a prince, son of the king. On the way to the palace, there was an accident, and the carriage overturned. The funeral was too sparse for a prince, and he was too beautiful to die. Kate wondered if he knew she was watching him, and if he guessed that she was in love with him. Her heart fluttered at the sight of him, and she hoped he was just temporarily asleep. On October 5th, 263, her first love left this world. After Edwin's death, Kate accepted an offer she was about to refuse. Ron told her that he promised her that her life with him would be completely wonderful. He proposed to get the Marquis's support, and she just wanted to leave that disgusting house. It was a loveless marriage, and Kate thought that if they were just nice to each other, it wouldn't be so bad. But all Kate got was betrayal. She wondered if Ron knew that she had found Rosalind's letter as he began to neglect her, and each time it was very hard and painful for her, and she thought nostalgically of her first love. The girl lay in tears, thinking of Edwin, and because she could have made a difference, and things would have gone differently if she had talked to him then. She really wanted such an opportunity as to see him again, and began to fall asleep. But suddenly, she was woken up by a girl asking what she was even thinking about when she was just sleeping like that. Kate woke up, and didn't realize what was going on. Rosalind stood in front of her, asking her how she slept and why she was there alone. Suddenly, Kate noticed that it wasn't their house and looked around and began to think of the house she had been given for her 16th birthday. But she didn't understand why she was there. Rosalind dragged the girl by the arm and told her that she was not thinking with her head at all and took her to her father as he was looking for her. Kate did not understand what had happened. Rosalind shouted that she knew nothing, and all she had heard was that they were discussing her marriage and someone had decided to marry her. This really surprised Kate, and when she heard about the marriage, she thought and said it was 2 years ago. Rosalind looked indignant and said that she couldn't have gotten married 2 years ago as she had just turned 18 and was talking complete nonsense. Rosalind dragged the girl to her father, telling him that she had found her. The girl saw Ron Blank in front of her, and Kate was very surprised because he looked younger. But it was definitely him. His father asked to introduce him to Kate and said his name was Ron Blank. Kate was in complete shock and did not understand what was happening. The guy approached the girl and said that it was their first meeting. He was very pleased to meet her. He said his name expecting reciprocation. Kate decided to introduce herself too and say that she was glad to meet her. The girl didn't understand how this could be the first meeting, but it really reminded her of the meeting she had 2 years ago. Kate was sure it was definitely not a dream and assumed that she had somehow managed to go back in time. She began to remember and thought that if she had really gone through with it, he should say that he wanted to get to know her better, and next, he would ask to marry her. The guy said everything identical to what was in the girl's head. Kate didn't realize what was happening because it was really too realistic for a dream. She decided that it really was the past. Kate started remembering all the moments about him saying nasty words to her and how he hated her, and constantly rebuking her for not being good at anything. Kate decided that it shouldn't happen again and told him no, adding that she didn't want to marry him specifically. The girl declared with certainty that she did not wish to marry him. Ron was very surprised, and her sister Rosalind began to shout at Kate with claims that she was crazy. Her father said it was too rude to the guest. Ron took it calmly, apologized, and said there was nothing wrong with saying no. He wasn't really going to impose on her. Kate said she was sorry for him too, and she didn't want to upset or offend him in any way. The girl didn't understand why she went back to that exact day 2 years ago. She assumed that it had all happened to change Ron and save the marriage, or that now Edwin was still alive. Kate approached her father with the words that she would leave him first, since she had somewhere to go. He tried to stop her, but to no avail. 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Edwin was supposed to be in the library at that time. The girl hoped so, but after all, she didn't know why she had gone back in time. Kate didn't really care because Edwin was alive. The girl told herself that this time it would keep Edwin from dying. When Kate came running into the library from around the corner, she saw Edwin reading a book. She made sure he was definitely alive. Kate walked over to him and touched his cheek. He was very warm. Suddenly, the memory of his funeral flashed in her mind, and she remembered how cold he had been then. The girl tearfully realized that he was definitely alive. Edwin shushed the girl and asked what she was doing, adding that it was very ridiculous. But Kate decided not to give up and said that they needed to talk. The guy looked sadly in her direction, asking if he knew her. Edwin added that she was annoying him. If she didn't let him go, his clothes would get wrinkled. Kate apologized and said she had something to tell him. She had expected to see something like this, remembering how he had behaved in the past. But she hadn't known he could be so cold. But the girl decided to calm down and draw conclusions, and came to the conclusion that such a reaction was quite natural if suddenly some stranger would start stroking her face and roaring on top of that. But she had to make sure he was really alive. If it's true that Kate has gone back in time, this time she might try to save Edwin and change fate itself. On October 3rd, 263, the girl woke up again, not in the present tense. Even after a night, Kate was still in the past. The girl wondered why she had actually gone back to the moment in which Edwin had not yet died. Kate decided that even if the guy acts aloof or, well, whatever, she wasn't going to let him get killed over such a trifle. and decided that she couldn't waste a second and had to head to the library because she had to tell the prince that he wasn't allowed to get in that carriage. The main character walked out into the library and said hello to Edwin. Kate came closer and put her hand on his book. The guy was indignant and asked what she was doing. The girl apologized for her rudeness, but she thought he wouldn't listen to her if she didn't. Edwin told her that yesterday she was crying as she stroked his face, and today she is pestering him again and saying she has something to tell him. Closing the book, he said he didn't want to hear it and ordered her to leave. Kate was really ashamed of yesterday, but it was really important. Edwin called her a lady crybaby and asked why he should listen to some stranger. The girl shouted about him not getting into the carriage that was going to the royal palace. The boy was very surprised to hear this. The girl kept saying that he would die if he didn't listen to her and asked him not to leave there. Edwin turned and said that everyone will die someday. Kate was shocked at this turn of events, and the guy kept saying that maybe today or maybe tomorrow, and it doesn't matter because everyone will meet their end someday. Kate was outraged because she didn't understand how he could say that when he was being warned about his own death. Edwin said indignantly that there was nothing more to tell. Then he asked her how she knew she was on her way to the palace. Kate was confused and didn't know what to answer. But the prince said she could not answer, and he hoped she would stop thinking about him. Guy added that he wasn't gullible enough to give in so easily to some stranger's delusions. Kate tried to tell him that she'd explain everything, and asked if he'd believe her if she said she'd gone back 2 years in time, a few days before he died. Kate said that after he died, she felt very sorry for him, and since she had gone back in time, she thought it would be nice if she could save him. She realized that Edwin didn't believe her and probably thought she was lying, but she said with a clear heart that it was true, and on the way to the palace, his carriage would overturn and he would die because of it. Edwin laughed and said that it even sounded strange, but he would assume that she was telling the truth. Kate thanked him for believing her, but the guy crapped on her, saying that he hadn't said he believed her. The prince suggested she imagine that she had gone back in time and decided to save him because she was sorry. And then he wondered what benefit Lady Crybaby would get from saving him. The guy said he knew she would look crazy, but still questioned why she was trying to save him, since they didn't even know each other, and doubted if it was really just about pity. Kate remained silent. Edwin continued to say that she was so persistent in her strange thoughts that it was ridiculous. The girl thought about the fact that after his death, it would be her fault, and the realization that she had never even tried to talk to him weighed heavily on her. She realized she couldn't say it out loud. Looking straight into her eyes, Edwin decided to ask if it was possible that Lady Crybaby could be in love with him. Kate was frightened and didn't understand how he guessed, and the guy only asked if he was right. Edwin leaned right in front of the girl, but Kate continued to deny it. And then, the prince decided to assume that she hated him. The protagonist covered her face and denied everything again. The guy said then he didn't know what was the reason for letting him know that, and said that probably the only reason she's trying to save him is guilt. And if that's the case, there's nothing he can do to help. Edwin turned and started to walk out, saying that he thought things would be different, and it would be nice if she could understand this elementary thing. Kate realized that she couldn't just let this chance go, because next time she wouldn't be able to go back in time. Suddenly, the girl jumped in front of the guy, screaming that she would not let him in. He angrily told her that she was in his way and asked her to get out of his way. Edwin told her to show some other reason why he should not be allowed to ride in the carriage. The guy asked me to tell him why he shouldn't die. Kate herself wondered for a moment why this particular man should live, but she wanted to, because she realized that she cared about Edwin and his life at all. If he needed a reason to live, and if so, she decided, she would give him a reason. Edwin once again asked if she liked him. Kate shouted that she didn't like him and she just loved him and asked him to just live. The girl confessed her feelings to someone for the first time and asked the prince if he would listen to her now. But Edwin was so stunned that he didn't even know what to say. Kate interrogated the guy, and he started laughing and saying that if she thought that because of her confession he would say that he would now live, she was deeply mistaken. Edwin apologized and said that now he only wanted to get in that carriage more. Kate was shocked and asked if he really wanted to get in a carriage that was destined to roll over and kill him. The prince, with a completely serious face, said that he wanted to get in that carriage and die again, and he hoped that everyone he cared about would suffer because of him. It had seemed to Kate before that this man was broken from the inside out. But why that was the case, she didn't know, and she didn't know how he became that way either. After her reflections, Kate decided to stop arguing with him and ask one question. Edwin said that if she promised him not to disturb his peace from now on, he would answer. The girl asked what he would get out of his death and why he was acting like a man in a hurry to die. Edwin asked again, and when Kate clarified, he bent down and said something in her ear. After the girl heard what he said, he told her to stay out of his sight, as he had already answered her question. Kate lay in bed and thought about Edwin. She thought about the fact that all he had said was that from his death, he would get salvation and a blessing to escape from his damn life. The girl wondered if salvation meant that he was in so much pain that it was better to die than to continue living. The girl didn't understand what she should do now. Suddenly, she found herself in some other room. Kate didn't realize where she was because she was definitely in her room a few seconds ago. Looking around, the girl noticed that there was nothing there. Suddenly, she heard crying and wondered whose, and Kate decided to walk over. She started walking toward the sound. Kate saw a coffin in front of her in which Edwin was lying. At the side was his mother, who was crying very loudly. Kate realized that she was at Edwin's funeral, and suddenly the man who was standing near the coffin asked her who she was. When Kate looked at his face, she noticed that the man looked like Edwin. He said that soon she would understand everything herself, and suddenly the girl woke up in her room and realized that it was just a dream. But she didn't realize what kind of man it was. Suddenly, he told her that she would realize everything herself. When she stood up, she decided it didn't matter now, as she didn't want to remember and see Edwin like that again. The girl collected herself and went to the library. There she saw Edwin again, and as Kate approached, she addressed him, saying that he could not ride in that carriage. The lad calmly replied that he could do as he pleased. Kate realized it was worse than she'd thought, and she'd even confessed. So she should be able to do anything, and asked if Edwin knew what death meant, and added that after that, he would cease to exist in the world. Edwin reluctantly asked if she'd promised him she wouldn't molest him. Kate was embarrassed, but asked if he had anything dear to him, like his pet or things he cared about and would miss if he didn't see them again. The prince said he didn't like that sort of thing. But Kate decided not to back down and asked what about the dream he would like to achieve before he passes away. Edwin stood up and said that there is nothing in this world that he values because of anything, and he would like to just live other than that. Absolutely nothing. Kate said with surprise in her voice that there was one reason he needed to live. The boy looked at her with displeasure, but she said that that reason was herself, because she was the girl who loved him, and her name was Kate Gerald. Edwin asked with a smirk, wondering where she got so much confidence from because she says so, as if he should go on with his life for the lady he met 2 days ago. Kate's girlfriend blamed herself a lot because she was bad at communication and barely managed to find the words. But there was nothing taking him away at all, and she didn't see how she could manage to convince him. While Kate was in her musings, she was interrupted by Edwin's voice asking why she couldn't even look him in the eye. And behind the boy, she sharply saw the man from the dream. The girl was surprised and thought it was a ghost. Edwin asked with consternation in his voice if she could see him. Kate covered her mouth in horror and asked if he could see him too, and she realized that it was true. The prince walked briskly over to the girl, took her by the shoulders, and began to ask her with horror if she often saw such things. Kate said it was the first time she had ever seen it, unless you counted her dreams. Edwin took Kate's hand and told her to go with him. The girl did not understand what was happening, and the prince said that he would give her the answer to any question, only she needed to follow him. In her thoughts, the girl Kate thought about the fact that the Lord himself had taken her hand and flushed very much, but sharply decided that now was not the time to think about such things. The guy pushed her and pulled her hand very hard. When they arrived at the place and stopped, Edwin asked Kate again if this was the first time she had seen something like this. Kate was very nervous and couldn't get a word out and asked him to let go of her hand first. The prince was dumbfounded, let go of her hand, and asked if she would answer him now. Kate decided to ask him again if he was talking about the thing that was hovering behind him in the library. Upon hearing that she had gotten it right, the girl said that she honestly still couldn't believe she'd seen it. She was interrupted by Edwin talking about what she said earlier about seeing them in a dream. From what she said, it wasn't the first time. Kate was very worried and said that she said that because the ghost looked like the person she had seen in her dream, and she was really seeing it for the first time. Edwin thought about it when he heard she was seeing him for the first time, and the girl decided to ask how he was doing with this sort of thing. And the guy decided to ask her why she thought he was telling her that. Kate thought about it and decided to ask him if what they had seen in the library was a ghost. Edwin said he didn't know what the thing was either, and told her to imagine it was, what like a ghost. Still, whatever it wasn't alive, and asked her to describe what it looked like without straining, just describe its appearance. Kate began to describe him. His hair was slightly slicked back, and he looked about 40 years old, and he looked a lot like Edwin. The guy was shocked and asked if she had seen the ghost's face. Kate was very nervous, so she took a long time to answer, and the guy jumped on her again, yelling about whether she had seen that ghost's face. But Kate's girlfriend calmed down a bit and said that his face looked quite clear. Suddenly, the prince sat on the floor with words about everything being useless. Kate started to get worried and asked if he was okay because it was all quite sudden and scary from the outside. Edwin held his hand to his head and said that that ghost was his father, that is, the late king. Edwin had said that his father had become a ghost and was watching him. Now the girl understood everything, because she thought she had seen his face somewhere before and remembered seeing Edwin's father at the victory parade as a child. It wasn't that he looked like Edwin. Suddenly Kate noticed that Edwin was looking strangely in the distance behind her. She turned and saw that there was something behind her. And there it was, the ghost of his father, and the girl didn't understand since when it had been haunting her. She heard the words that someone must live. Kate repeated those words in her voice. Edwin was surprised and asked what it meant. When the prince heard back from Kate that those words were spoken to her by a ghost, and now really didn't understand what was going on. Kate asked him if he could somehow explain to her why that ghost was watching him, since she could help him somehow. Edwin didn't take her word that she could help him and said that she didn't even have a reason to do so. Kate was silent for a long time. She couldn't say anything, but finally managed to squeeze out the words that she just didn't want to see him suffer, and she lowered her eyes indignantly. After some thought, Edwin said that if she asked him nicely, he wouldn't get in that carriage after all, but she must make a bargain with him in return. Kate listened attentively. October 5th was the date of Edwin's death. The Lord was already approaching the carriage, but suddenly Kate came running up behind him. She was screaming and holding his hand, telling him that he had promised her that he would not ride in that carriage. The guy was in total shock and didn't understand how she knew and got there. Kate yelled that none of that mattered, as the emphasis now was on the fact that he promised her he wouldn't get on. The prince asked if she was afraid he would break their pact and get in the carriage to die, calling Kate a lady crybaby and a truly caring man. The girl stood in despair, and Edwin said that unfortunately he was also good at keeping his word, and everyone would realize that when the letter was delivered. Kate realized that he had just sent the letter. The carriage started to pull away, and Edwin told her that, as she could tell, he hadn't gotten in it and had indeed kept his word. Kate was shocked and calmed down a little when she saw that he was beside her and wasn't going anywhere. Edwin asked Kate why she didn't trust people and how she even knew about that place. Looking at Kate, he noticed she was crying again and asked what was wrong. To Kate, it was just a relief because he wasn't dead or frowned upon. Edwin hesitated and turned away abruptly and said that he didn't want to see her crying and told her to hurry up and go back, as he had kept his promise. Kate apologized for disturbing him and started to walk away, but suddenly Edwin stopped her. Kate didn't realize what was going on. He put his coat over her head and told her that he didn't want to see even a glimpse of her face, so she had to cover herself. When Kate looked in his direction, he told her not to make that face because it looked weird and put more cloth over her face and ordered her to go. Kate began to remember the moment when he had said he wouldn't get in the carriage in return for them making a deal with her. The girl had been very glad to hear it then. Edwin had said again that she wasn't serious because she never understood everything the first time, but he wouldn't repeat himself for her sake. Edwin saw that the girl was smiling and said that she was early to rejoice, for it was not something jolly, but a bargain, and the terms of it were that from that moment she would pass on the ghost's words. Kate said she was willing, as long as he really didn't get in the carriage. Just in case, the girl decided to ask again if she just needed to relay the ghost's words. Kate looked very happy, and Edwin noticed it. Kate said that she was naturally happy because now he wouldn't die. The prince called the girl naive because she thinks that he won't die just because he won't get into the carriage, because all destined events will happen sooner or later, and one way or another no one can escape his fate. Kate's face changed dramatically, and she asked if he would die anyway. Edwin, with a serious face, asked if she would believe him if he told her that. The girl with joy on her face said that she would believe him, for he believed her and promised not to get into that carriage. The Prince of Grozny snorted and replied that he didn't believe her and it was getting dark and he had to go. So next time they could talk about the ghost. In the morning, Kate noticed that she'd overslept and was too relaxed simply because Edwin hadn't been in an accident. And just like that, she'd passed out. Kate was glad she had moved one step forward in Edwin's confidence and decided to head to the library quickly before she was too late. Kate was about to leave, but at the door, she noticed a boy. When she looked at him, she realized it was Ron. The guy greeted her. Kate didn't expect to meet him like this. Ron Blank apologized for barging in, but he justified it all by saying that he thought she already knew he'd shown up without asking. Kate asked what the reason for his visit was. Guy said that the Marquis had ordered a dress for Lady Kate on the occasion of her 19th birthday. When Kate heard that, she thought about her birthday. She thought back to her own birthdays, and of course she had gotten presents, but they had meant nothing to her. Ron Blank noticed that the girl had gone pale and began to worry. Ron apologized because he thought it was all because of his suggestion, and since he didn't want to create a cause for concern for such a lady, continued to apologize, though it wasn't just because of that. Kate calmly told him that everything was fine and they needed to get down to business quickly since she needed to leave soon. Ron said he would take a little of her time. The man proceeded to take measurements for the future dress. Kate knew that Ron had only married her to expand his boutique, which was why he was so persistent. Although the girl didn't love him anymore, Kate remembered looking at Ron with embarrassment, and the guy smiling, asking what was wrong with him because she was looking in his direction strangely. Ron told Kate that everything was ready and he would take her to the mansion in 2 days, and then they would see each other. The girl had no reason to get close to him this time, simply because he was the reason for her happiness, and she wanted only a happy future ahead for everyone. The time had come, and Kate had to pack as quickly as possible and hurry to the library. She didn't know that all these measurements would take so long, and she wondered if Edwin had already arrived. When Kate got to the place, she didn't see the guy there and realized that she was late. When she saw a book on the windowsill, she came closer and looked at it, realizing that it was Edwin's book, and it was very strange that he had forgotten it. Cyclical Sequence is a novel that tells the tragic love story of Arthur and Bella. Bella picked up the pocket knife and brought it to her wrist without hesitation. She had only one purpose. She had to cut her wrist with the knife. She wasn't scared, she was more scared of the future without him. At the beginning of the novel, just after the death of the main character Arthur, his lover tries to follow him to the afterlife, and in the process, she is visited by Arthur in ghostly form and told that she must surely live. It was all an eerie coincidence with what Kate had dreamed. Bella, who was about to die after losing her lover, and Edwin, who seeks his salvation in death, and the ghost trying to save them, who says Edwin must live. And even if this world is a novel, Kate is only a minor character passing through. Edwin was sitting in the park reading his book. Kate approached the guy and told him that she was busy yesterday and couldn't make it to the library. The prince ordered her to leave because he has nothing to talk about with a liar who can't even keep her promise. Kate was surprised to hear something about a promise and asked what he was talking about. The guy said he'd told her he wanted to talk to her next time. Edwin says that the carriage left on the 5th, but today is the 7th and it's been quite some time. Kate asked with a surprised face if he was talking about waiting for her yesterday. Edwin's face was filled with horror. The prince arrogantly said she was crazy to think that way, and he had no reason to do it. He was just really pissed off that she hadn't kept her word. Kate apologized, since she didn't know it was a promise. Lord said that he would forgive her, but only once. And Kate suddenly pointed to his book and said that when she was reading it yesterday, she noticed that the main character looked a lot like him and asked if that was why he was still reading it. Guy sighed heavily and said that Lady Crybaby always asked a lot of questions. Edwin said that that book was that man's favorite work until the day he died. Kate asked if he meant by that man his father. Edwin confirmed that he did. Edwin's father. His most favorite book until his death was The Cyclical Sequence. Kate said that if it was the late king's favorite book, it may be a clue. Edwin was stunned, and Kate said that their situation was out of line and that it was rather odd that the content of the book was repeating what was happening. Edwin said that she couldn't dig into it because no one would let her, and actually, he only asked her to relay what the ghost said. He asked her to forget everything and said he was leaving, but it looked like the ghost was going to show up tonight. Kate tried to stop him by taking his sleeve and pointing her hand at the ghost. Edwin started yelling at the girl with questions about what the ghost said. He even grabbed her. It was the first time Kate had ever seen such an expression on his face. The girl said that she will tell him, but in return for the rest of the day, she asks to study this book with her. Kate begged Edwin to study this book with her. In her mind, the girl was really scared because she thought she had just said a complete nonsense. She thought she had just asked him out on a date. The ghost was still standing beside them. This was very embarrassing for Kate because she thought it was very embarrassing, and not only Edwin heard it, but his ghost daddy as well. Edwin turned to Lady Crybaby and said that she thought he was joking because she threatened him with the ghost's words. Kate apologized for her tactlessness, but Kate really wanted to study the book and said that if they thought about it together, they could find a solution to the problem that was plaguing them, so she wanted to help. Edwin put his hands on his head, but in the end, told her to follow him. The girl was walking with the thoughts that this was a very unreasonable request. Suddenly, Edwin asked where it was. Kate didn't understand what he was asking, so she asked again. And Edwin said that he was asking about the place where she wanted to go to study the book and asked her to go there and he would follow her. Kate said with embarrassment that she didn't have any particular place in mind. To all this, Edwin simply told her to follow him as he had a place to look for documents. The prince walked very fast, so the girl had to run after him. Kate, after a long search with the Lord, decided to offer to discuss all that they had found over a cup of flavored drink in the cafe. Edwin reluctantly agreed. When they were sitting in the cafe, the girl had told him that she hadn't expected the Lord himself to accept her request, and he had replied that it was a threat, not a request. Kate joked that it was exactly a threat simply because he said so. Edwin didn't want to fall for threats with obvious ulterior motives behind them, but he needed to know what his father had said, and there were simply no other reasons, so the crybaby lady shouldn't be making up scenarios in his head. Kate ventured to ask if he knew her name. The Lord said with certainty that he did not, and the girl replied that she knew his full name, Edwin Arthur Windsor. The prince was not surprised, for it was natural that she knew him, for he is to me the last individual, and himself the son of a king. Edwin asked how she was able to compare the two when everyone in the kingdom knows him. Kate agreed, and said that still her name meant a lot to her. After saying that, the Lord called her Katie and even tried to say her last name correctly. The girl was surprised to hear it, and he said that was the name of the Lady Crybaby, and turned away in embarrassment. Kate said that there was nothing wrong with the fact that he got her name a little wrong, and suddenly a wave of memories came over Kate of running to her grandmother, and she called her kitten and hugged her granddaughter, and then she was offered cookies, which the girl ate quite rarely. The girl was glad, but was afraid to eat it because her father had ordered her not to eat it. Her grandmother left their family long ago, but Kate's grandmother was the only person who gave Kate love as a child and in no way rejected her like the rest of her family. When her grandmother was at her death, she apologized to the girl for leaving her there alone. Her granddaughter was crying bitterly, and her grandmother called her Catty one last time and called her her favorite kitty. She held the girl's hand and closed her eyes. In a world where there was no more grandmother, Kate didn't expect to hear that nickname again and started crying because she never even thought she would ever hear it again, so not even from her grandmother. Lord looked at all this and asked if she was crying because he called her name wrong. The girl apologized with a tremor in her voice. It was hard for her to speak because her grandmother was everything to her, and the memories were killing her. Kate said that she was crying because she was called that by a very dear person in the past. Edwin asked her to stop because he was sick of her crying. Kate apologized, and the prince said that he was sick of not only her tears, but also her apologies because she apologizes all the time, and he's not comfortable. Kate noticed that the boy was hesitating, but suddenly remembered that she hadn't yet told him about the words she'd heard from the ghost. When she started talking about them, Edwin was completely focused. It was the only topic of conversation in which he had his full attention. Kate's girlfriend said his father definitely said, "I'm sorry," and the girl cried again. The prince was shocked that she starts crying so often just for no reason. Kate apologized and said that his look was very similar to the last time she saw him apologize to those they had to leave behind. Suddenly, the guy came up to Kate and started wiping her tears. The only excuse for this was that he hated to see tears. The girl thanked Edwin, to which he replied that he did not do it for her gratitude, but the girl was still grateful to him for his care. Edwin said it was getting late and they had finished all their business, so the lady should hurry up and go home. Edwin started to leave, but was stopped by Kate asking when she could give him back the handkerchief he used to wipe her tears. The prince ordered her to just throw it away because he didn't need it anymore. Kate wondered how possible it could be to have recurring dreams, because people usually say that dreams are nothing more than embodiments of useless thoughts. But if they were so much alike, could the useless thoughts connect and make the same sense? Edwin's father came up behind Kate and again asked for forgiveness. The memory that saddened the girl again was the grandmother who had died and asked for forgiveness, forcing it on herself. The grandmother looked a lot like Edwin's father at the moment she died and asked for forgiveness. The boy from the dream was crying, and the girl, Kate, looking at him, thought it might be little Edwin. The girl assumed that she was at the funeral of the deceased king. Suddenly, the man who stood behind Kate, that is, Edwin's father, called out to the girl and pointed his hand at his son and asked that she grant him salvation. The king began to turn into flowers that flew in the air. The girl Kate woke up and decided that she must embody this salvation. Because of the dream, Kate wanted to go see Edwin right then and there. But they hadn't agreed on anything today, and she'd been bugging him lately, so if she got on his nerves today, he'd be very angry. Suddenly, she heard the door knock and told her to come in. When she saw who entered the room, she realized that Ron had arrived with her dress, and she needed to keep her promise. Ron Blank greeted Kate and handed her the dress and asked if she would mind if she could try the dress on. Kate agreed and went to change. When the girl was dressed, Kate came out and asked if she looked okay because she didn't usually wear something like that. Ron was speechless at the sight of such beauty, and the girl said it was a little too much. Ron stared at her, and Kate didn't realize if she looked strange or if she had something ugly. But Ron stood up and walked over to Kate and took her hand, and he kissed it and told her that my lady was beautiful in that dress. Blushing, Kate thanked him, but she was stuffy enough in there. Kate started to say something about him delivering her dress, but suddenly he squeezed her hand really hard, and Kate didn't realize what was going on because he was looking at her really weird. Ron apologized and said that he just thought he saw a thread sticking out of his sleeve, and that was rather rude of him. So if she didn't mind, he could fix it now, and it would take a little time. Ron quickly picked up his needle and began to fix his work. Kate wondered what he was even thinking. Even if he was very careful about his work, it was surprising. But it had happened a couple of times in the past, and if Ron found the slightest flaw in a hard-won garment, he'd fix it on the spot. But he was clumsy and often hurt himself. And right now, Ron was clumsy too, and Kate said that she was telling him to use the thimble, even if it annoyed him a lot. Ron was surprised and asked what she was talking about. The girl realized that she had said something unnecessary since they weren't married and he didn't know anything about the thimble from the future. Kate quickly apologized and said that she just thought he might hurt himself. Kate wasn't allowed to mix memories from this life and her past life. My lady added that she didn't want him to feel uncomfortable just because of the dress. Ron calmly said that he wasn't upset at all. He just thought the lady who was worried about him looked very nice. It was strange for Kate to hear that. Because of all the people in the world, he thought she was the sweet one, and when she worried about him, Ron would tell her that she couldn't possibly know any better for him, and it was the same every time. Ron finished his business and asked if she would invite him to the banquet, because he really wanted to see the beautiful lady dancing in the dress he had made. When Kate thought about what he had done, she wanted to say no, but now she had no reason to say no. He and the Ron she knew might be different, but she couldn't forget about everything and get close to him. Ron thanked her. Kate didn't understand why he was thanking her at all and started to cover her face in embarrassment. The guy asked her if she was okay and thought that maybe he was putting too much pressure on the girl with his sudden offers. Kate sat down and said she was just a little dizzy and needed to sit down now. Ron said he was leaving and asked that the lady try to get a good night's rest and get better before her birthday. In the morning, Kate had a serious headache, as if she had forgotten something. She remembered her dream and the fact that she'd met eyes with someone there. She called Ron and asked if he knew anything about Lord Edwin. The guy stopped at the door and interrogated if she was talking about the same jilted prince. Kate was very surprised to hear him referred to as the jilted prince. Ron asked her if it was the first time she had heard that story, since it was like everyone knew about it because it was a big deal, and it was pretty nasty. Kate was very worried when she heard it, but she replied to Ron that she was hearing about it for the first time and she didn't know anything about this situation. Kate asked Ron if he was talking about Prince Edwin being abandoned as soon as the previous king died. Ron asked the girl to calm down and promised to answer all her questions, asking her not to worry. The main character couldn't even imagine that she spent almost all of her time at home until she met the prince. No one had ever told her about such a thing, and even after his death, when she learned that Edwin was a prince, she never tried to find out more about him. For Kate, her lover was not Prince Edwin, but Edwin from the library. But now, since she was determined to help him, and she needed to know the reason why the throne that should have belonged to Edwin had just been given to someone else. Ron began his story and told them that when Prince Edwin was a boy, the late King Dasho Windsor had died suddenly, and the country had fallen into disrepair. But then there was someone who could fix the chaos. His name was Benson Windsor. He was the younger brother of the late King Licht and the current reigning king. Kate asked why this was so, since by inheritance the throne should have gone to his son Edwin, even though he was young. Ron said that such information they all could not have known, and perhaps it was all about Edwin's unpleasant character, as it is said that he always sighs heavily before starting dialogue, and even the conservatives who wanted to put him on the throne eventually turned their backs on him, and he was left alone. Kate now understood how others saw Edwin from the outside. Ron said there were probably other reasons, and the current King Benson had always been talented at politics. After his accession to the throne and the change of political course, there were people who began to praise him as a saint. Kate didn't understand why he had sent his nephew away and why he was nicknamed the Abandoned Prince. After Benson became king, the late king's wife, or in other words, Prince Edwin's mother, the Queen, proposed to Benson and became his wife in defiance of judgment. Kate was shocked to hear that Prince Edwin's mother had married his uncle. Ron couldn't understand how she didn't know about it, since there was a big scandal about it, and many people disliked the queen for marrying right after the death of her previous husband without even keeping any mourning. The prince got here after their wedding, and it seemed that he was chased away from there. That's why he was nicknamed the Abandoned Prince. Kate was very unpleasant to hear that, and she couldn't even imagine that such a thing could happen to her lover. After an awkward silence, Ron asked why Kate was interested in the story. She replied that she had seen Prince Edwin in the library and was curious about his story. Ron looked at his watch and said he had to go, so he left, wishing her a good night's rest. Kate thanked him for the story, and as he left, she thought only of Prince Abandoned and why she hadn't tried to get to know Edwin better. Edwin remained lonely after King Licht's death, and no one supported him. That was probably the reason why the late king wanted to apologize to him when Kate appeared. If that was the case, why could she also see him? At that moment, there was another knock at the girl's door, and it was the maid who said that she had washed her handkerchief as the mistress had requested. Kate thanked her, and the maid left. Edwin told Kate to get rid of the handkerchief, but she didn't dare to do that after all the events and held the handkerchief to herself with a smile closing her eyes. Looking back at the handkerchief, Kate noticed the ED patch. Kate returned to the library and said hello to my lord. He asked her to leave as she was annoying him very much. Kate noted that he hadn't changed and asked to see her face. The prince asked what her expression was and if she liked being chased away and saying things like that. Embarrassed, Kate said that she had come to return the handkerchief to him. Edwin went on to say that he had ordered her to throw it away and asked her not to make him repeat himself. The girl drew the handkerchief closer to the prince and asked if it was dear to him. Edwin laughed and asked how she had come to that conclusion. Kate pointed to the embroidery and said that it said Eddie. She added that she thought it must have been something important to him. Edwin was reminded of how his mother, who had betrayed him, had wiped his tears at the funeral with that handkerchief, a story that displeased the prince, and he stood up abruptly, shouting that he no longer needed it, clutching the handkerchief in his hand. This thing was no longer needed by the prince, and he was very angry with the girl for reminding him of it. So he turned away, and Kate asked if she could have that handkerchief. Edwin turned back and said she could throw it away or keep it, and he didn't care, as he wasn't interested in things that no longer belonged to him. Kate turned to the Lord, to which he got very angry because she always distracts him, but the girl just covered his mouth and apologized. The main character, Kate, said that there are a lot of people in the library now, and he should keep his voice down. Edwin asked in a whisper what she wanted to tell him. Kate couldn't say anything because she had no reason to come to him, but she suddenly remembered that the day before yesterday, Edwin had said they needed to talk about the ghost, and she wondered why he hadn't agreed to anything with her. She felt very uncomfortable talking about it. Edwin asked disdainfully if she had distracted him simply because she was curious about something like that. Kate was embarrassed and said that she was thinking that she wanted to quickly come up with a detailed plan with him. The prince realized what the reason was. And even if they had arranged to meet, if it was about a girl in love with him, and understandably so, the fact that she could come to him whenever she wanted was the norm. Kate was embarrassed because he remembered what she'd said about being in love. The Lord looked at the girl intently and asked if they had met Lady Crybaby before. Kate hoped that perhaps he remembered. Usually Edwin didn't forget people he was familiar with, but this time he didn't know when. But he remembered he and she had glanced over this way. Kate confirmed what he said and said that he had taken her hand away, even though it was only once, and asked him to step back. The guy said that of course he remembered her, since she had been there for him then. Before he finished his sentence, he heard Kate say that he paid attention to her because the late king was standing near her then. He asked if she only found out about it now, and if she could have seen his father as a ghost before. Kate said that she had only started seeing ghosts after she had gone back in time, and really was seeing him that way for the first time. Edwin confirmed that she'd said something like that before, that she'd started seeing ghosts since she'd gone back in time 2 years ago, and asked what was wrong with her face. Kate was very glad that he believed her. But the boy upset her again, saying that there were things in the world that couldn't be explained by simple logic, and she couldn't rationalize it, could she? Suddenly, a ghost appeared, and the girl asked the prince why he used to call her a liar and not believe her. When Edwin noticed the ghost, he told her not to talk to him and added that he trusted her completely now, so she could ask fewer questions and be calm. This time, the ghost just laughed with joy and said he loved Edwin. The prince asked what he said this time, and the girl was shy and said that it was her birthday tomorrow, and if he came to the festive ball, Kate would give him the words of the late king. Kate handed him her letter of invitation. Edwin looked at her very strangely, but the girl realized that it was his father who had pushed her to this point. He snatched the letter out of the girl's hands and said that conditional deals were terrible. Kate apologized and said she wouldn't do it again. Edwin looked at Kate and said that he had asked her not to express that look on her face. Rosalind had always been like that and enjoyed Kate's feast as if it were her own. If she had planned to do it, why she had nominated Kate was beyond comprehension. Suddenly, the girl remembered the invitation she had given to the prince and wondered if Edwin would show up. The hall was full of people, and Kate stood on the balcony and looked into the distance. Suddenly, she heard someone telling her that she looked very tired. Turning back, she expected to see Edwin there, but much to Kate's dismay, when Kate turned around, she saw not Edwin there, but Ron, who was greeting her with a gift in his hands. Kate was very surprised to see him. Ron Blank asked if the lady was all right and why she was standing there alone. Realizing that it looked like Edwin wasn't coming after all, Kate felt sad. She told Ron that she was just a little tired. Ron apologized for being late, but he wanted to sincerely congratulate her on her 19th birthday and presented her with his present, which he wanted to give to Kate personally. Kate thanked him, and Ron said he was a little late, meaning he had some things to finish, but before he could finish, Ron started coughing. When Kate saw him start coughing, she instinctively told him that he could get sick easily and asked why he wasn't wearing a scarf. Ron didn't understand and asked her what she meant. Suddenly, she realized that she had made a mistake, since she couldn't act like she knew him well. Ron asked if he had ever told her about his cough, and my lady said that naturally she remembered everything, and the boy called her a very kind and caring girl. Ron stepped closer to Kate and said with a smile, the moment he had first met her, he had. Before he could finish, they were interrupted by Edwin, who was between them, asking what kind of holiday banquet this was. Kate was very frightened when she saw it. Edwin grabbed the girl's hand and asked her if it was really her party, as she was standing on the balcony and not in the hall with the guests. He started to say something about Ron, but told her to forget it, glaring menacingly in Ron's direction. Anyway, the prince was looking for Kate because she herself had told Edwin to come, and he added that she had no manners since she hadn't met him. Kate apologized to the prince because she didn't think he'd actually come. Edwin, as usual, snapped at the girl and said that he didn't come for her and whispered that he was just curious to know what his father had said. The girl's mood changed drastically, and she felt relieved. Kate was smiling again, and Edwin told her once again not to make that face because it annoyed him so much. Ron didn't expect to see His Majesty there, but the prince replied that he didn't want to see the tailor here either. Kate was surprised that they knew each other. Ron said that it just so happened that they had gotten to know each other slightly because he had sewed clothes for the prince a few times. And anyway, he didn't know that Edwin knew the lady. Milord said they weren't close, and she shouldn't make up scenarios in her head. Ron confirmed that the prince's relationship with Kate was a surprise to him. Suddenly, Rosalind joined them and introduced herself to the prince, saying she was honored to meet him and gave her name. Edwin simply asked who she was, and the girl said with a smile that she was Kate's older sister, and it would be nice if he contacted their family first, and then they could formally welcome him. The prince ordered her to get off his back because he had nothing to talk to her and her sister about. Rosalind was in complete shock and didn't understand what the reaction was. But suddenly Edwin said it didn't matter, and taking Kate's hand, ordered her to follow him, affectionately calling the girl Cat Lady. They needed to discuss something one-on-one, and Kate was still in complete shock that the guy had called her a cat. She confirmed that they should talk further away from everyone, and they stepped back. When they got far enough away, Edwin asked again why she was making a strange expression on her face, and when she started to explain, he asked her to stop, because even without her words, it was clear that it was her strange thoughts again, and clearly something not important. Edwin had always been attractive to Kate, but in a formal suit, he looked even more beautiful. While Kate was admiring him, the guy asked her why she wasn't talking. Kate honestly didn't understand what he wanted from her, so she asked, and Edwin reminded her why they'd stepped away. Edwin told her that she should tell him about what her father said, because she said to come to her party if he wanted to hear it. Kate started to say that the late king had told her, addressing him as sorry, and wasn't sure what he wanted and was telling him to do something. The boy was furious and shouted that his father wanted him to forgive him, and he was sure his father was watching him from somewhere and should listen to him carefully. Edwin yelled that he had never lived a normal life since the day the king died, and it was his father who sent him to that prison. When Kate heard all this, she was stunned and assumed it was all seen because of the late king. Edwin fell to his knees and wondered why his father kept appearing before his eyes, and wondered if he was the one who had told on his son and ordered Kate to keep Em from getting into that carriage, and didn't understand why his father was now trying to save him from death. The prince didn't understand why his father didn't leave him to die from the beginning, because he knows that no matter what, Edwin will endlessly die over and over again. No matter what, Edwin would endlessly die over and over again. Kate asked the Lord to wait and asked him what he meant. The guy with the hysterical smile said it looked like a ghost, said nothing, and it was just as he said, and Kate heard correctly that he kept dying over and over again. Edwin goes on to say that if she thinks the carriage incident is the end of it all, it's not. If Edwin avoids the carriage incident, only more gruesome deaths await him, and he endlessly repeats his 18-year experience of life. Kate asked him to give her more details. Edwin said that it was complicated and that they had a long story ahead of them. Edwin turned to Richard and said it was him. Richard greeted the Lord and asked if the girl standing beside him could be his lover. The prince starts yelling at Richard and saying that it's not at all like he thought his prince had found a new lover, so he decides to ask. And if the misunderstanding is over, he asks to pass them inside. Edwin went out, and a man named Richard told the girl that he kept wondering why the Lord had left so tense, and now he realized that it was all because of the meeting with the lady, and if she didn't mind, he'd like to know her name. The girl remembered that she hadn't introduced herself either. She had given her name, Kate Gerald. Richard said it was an honor to meet her, Lord Edwin's girlfriend. Kate was shocked at this turn of events, and suddenly Edwin came in with words for them to stop talking and come into the hall. Richard said he was making tea for them and hoped they would spend a pleasant time together. Edwin looked at him with contempt, and the girl tried to explain that it wasn't what he thought. But Richard didn't care. Kate was very uncomfortable with Richard's jokes, and the prince had a serious look on his face. Kate noticed that Edwin had really gone back in time, as if he'd died many times because of it. And Kate realized how helpless he felt, knowing that he had to move straight to his death. Suddenly, Edwin asked Lady Crybaby what she was thinking about, because she was sitting very quietly and looking at one point. Kate said she wasn't thinking about anything and was just staring. Edwin was very bored and asked Kate to first tell him everything she knew about him. Kate was very nervous and said that all she knew was that he would die in the carriage. The prince was surprised to hear that she only knew that, because he assumed that she knew much more, since she could hear the speech of a ghost. Kate kept saying afterward that she wanted to know more about him, and Edwin said he needed to be sure of something before he started his story. Kate wondered what it was about, and Edwin began his story. The first was that she can't pry into his life just because she knows his situation, so she has to live without any useless interference. And the second was that he's not telling her everything because he has any feelings for her, so she shouldn't misunderstand him. Kate interjected, and he said that she should not make up anything to herself so that there are no weird misunderstandings, and she should also not listen to Richard. Kate said that she promised that she would stick to the rules, and Edwin began his story. As he had said earlier, he was reliving his 18th birthday from the beginning, and the first was the death of his father. After the death of the king and his existence, he was like some dead rat. He came to this town as if someone was chasing him. A few years later, the palace sent a carriage inviting Edwin to attend an event. Without any suspicion, he got in it. But somehow he died that way too. So the carriage got into a major accident, and he started to faint and felt death scampering towards him. That's how wasted he died. But when Edwin opened his eyes, he went back a week before he got into the carriage and told Lady Crybaby that this was the reason he was not surprised at her words, for he had experienced this one too. Kate noticed that it was the same, and she and Edwin returned in the same way. From then on, he began to see that ghost, that is, his father. He was a white, translucent figure, and at that moment, Edwin's father called him by name, and the prince really believed it was his father. Kate interrupted Edwin and said that he had asked her to relay his words, for he could not hear himself speak, and here he told of hearing his father's voice. Edwin said that at first he could hear his father, but now he could not make out anything at all, seeing him vaguely. With each return back, the figures and voices grew fainter, and now he could not listen to his father at all. Kate said that if Edwin came back often, it meant he confirmed and said that if he avoided the carriage, he was dying of poison, and if he ran away from the poison, something else was killing him. It would be his 10th death, as this was the 9th time this fall had reoccurred. Kate didn't understand how it was even possible for something like this to happen so many times. Edwin dying over and over again. Kate decided to ask if he had any possible explanations that came to mind. Edwin said thoughtfully that his possible explanation was that something had been bothering him lately, and Kate asked what it was. In response, she saw him pointing his finger at her and saying that it was Lady Crybaby, who had traveled back in time to a time when he was alive. The sequence in which Edwin returned was unexplainable. The prince asked if Kate thought his situation resembled the contents of this book, and said that he thought so too at first, because he had read it many times and read it over and over again, believing there might be a clue to his situation. His 9th regression added up to reading it many times, and when he read it, already just out of habit, Kate went back in time to a time when he was alive. Kate had often thought about this, and why she had come back to the exact place where he was still alive, even though he was a special person to her. But to him, she was probably nothing more than another observer. The prince finished his story and said that the fact that Kate can see his father's ghost is quite strange. Moreover, she used the ghost as an excuse to prevent his death. Kate said that she just felt sorry for him, and she loved Edwin. Lord Sam had said the phrase, and Kate had been very embarrassed and surprised that he remembered it. It was love, and people were capable of doing a lot for it. Richard came in and said he had brought tea. Richard said that he had a thought when he heard about it. Edwin didn't understand what he was talking about, so he asked him again. Richard decided to ask if it wasn't His Majesty who sent away the carriage that came a couple days ago. To that, Edwin said that he just didn't want to go then, and there was no problem with that. Richard asked if Edwin had sent anything away in that carriage because he had just gotten a message from the palace, and an event that was supposed to be at the palace that he was going to go to had been canceled. The prince was very surprised and asked why, and Richard said that he had assumed that his lord had sent the carriage away beforehand, knowing it. After listening to all this, Edwin said Richard could go about his business. Kate asked what had happened, and the guy was pensive, and then said that things had changed because never once, even if the carriage incident had happened, the event itself had never been canceled. And if such small, useless things merged together, then the situation had changed for the first time, and wouldn't they get their own significance because she had intervened? He didn't see how it could still affect him, and Kate asked if they could change that right as the event was canceled. They can't know for sure if they will send him now. Edwin jumped in and said that he had warned her to mind her place and not try to pry into his life. Kate sympathetically apologized for saying such inappropriate things, but for once, the truth could be changed. Edwin was at a loss to ask if she thought he would let the deaths happen because he wanted them to happen, and initially he tried very hard to avoid them. Each time he promised himself he would survive, The next time, he promised himself he would survive. And so it went on endlessly. Just thinking about Edwin, such a mediocre, shy Kate was able to become brave now too. That's why she wants to become his strength this time. Kate said that this time Edwin is not alone, because he has her. The guy was shocked, and the girl added that he had nothing to lose, because how could they know if the poisoning would change with her intervention? Edwin kept saying it was stupid, but he agreed and she talked him into it. For the first time, the guy smiled, and the girl asked if she could come again tomorrow because she wanted to discuss his poisoning in detail, and she would look for that information. Kate decided that was a good reason and to start looking for materials about poisons. But there could be so many different kinds of poisonous creatures in this world that she could get very confused because everyone was always wanting to kill each other. Overnight, Kate checked everything and realized that at this rate she was going to be late. She decided to start packing, but she noticed the present Ron had given her for her birthday and decided that she should probably at least open it. When Kate opened it, she saw a gorgeous blue dress. Kate remembered what Ron had said earlier, all about how he was running a little late because he was finishing something and coughing a lot. As she held the dress in her hands, Kate noticed that it was very soft. And Ron had definitely used high-quality fabrics and had worked very hard on this gift. The protagonist assumed that he likes her, even if Ron's tender look is sincere, and even if it really was once love, she still doesn't believe it after what happened. Kate was greeted by Richard, and again tried to say that she was my lord's girl, but Kate was embarrassed and asked him not to say that. After she and Edwin decided to try to prevent the poisoning, the first step for Kate and the prince was to identify the possible culprit. Many times, the poisoning attempts were accidental, and any ingestion of food could mean death. Edwin could die from even a small cut, and there were even times when he would die covered in blood, and he thought they would stop this time. But it kept happening. Kate asked if it made sense to drink the tea Richard had brought because it might be poisoned. Edwin said that the poisoning had happened at a time when he hadn't expected it, and there was a good chance that the suspect was familiar with it, so he considered Richard the prime suspect. Richard served Edwin in the palace, and even here he continues to serve him, but he said that if Richard was the real culprit, Edwin would have died much sooner, and he was quickly crossed off the list of suspects. The prince said that Richard is just a cunning old man who likes to always overdo things, just like in her situation. Kate went in to see my lord, and he asked that she sit down. The girl understood that the man who would not let her live alone, and he had easy access to Edwin, and realized that they could not say that Richard's fate was impossible. Suddenly, Mary knocked on the door of the room. That's when Kate remembered that the second prime suspect, not counting Richard, was the prince's maid, Mary. When she had come in, she had said that she had heard her master had guests, and so she had brought snacks. Mary, who served Edwin at the palace, was the prince's head maid, and Kate had heard that she was now in charge of the kitchen, but the Lord had said that in addition to these two suspects, there was no denying that there could be a third person since the assassins were constantly changing. Based on Edwin's research on the poisons used for the poisoning, none of them could be so easily obtained, and they all used incredibly expensive poisons, the cost of which was determined by bids at auctions. Edwin asked if Kate thought that one person could so easily get his hands on such a thing as an exclusive poison. The girl thought he meant that the intruder could be from outside. Edwin didn't know that himself, and said it was just his guess. And if it wasn't, they would still have to save up money for a long time just to kill him. Edwin said these things so calmly that Kate was even creeped out by it. But right now, it was important for them to find out the face behind all of this, and they needed to find out who had directly poisoned Edwin. Turning toward the prince, Kate noticed that he was drinking the tea that Mary had brought. Kate screamed, asking what he was doing, and my lord calmly said he was just drinking tea. Kate asked, with a tremor in her voice, that she just needed to know what he was going to do because it could cause him to be poisoned. The prince said that he would just die if he was fated because it had happened more than once. Edwin said he was going to die, and Kate assured him that he couldn't say it all so nonchalantly because they were in this together, and he and she had already decided that, and Kate asked him to consult with her before he did anything, or at least just think about the consequences. The guy said he'd think about it. Kate decided to drink tea too, and took the mug in her hands, but Edwin ran up to her and knocked the mug out of her hands, saying that no one allowed her to drink tea, and if he does, it doesn't mean that Kate can too. The main character just thought it would be okay since Edwin had already drunk it. Kate noticed the tea residue on the prince's face and wanted to clean it up, but Edwin said it was getting late and she should head home. Kate thought that maybe she had done something wrong because he was very angry, just because she wanted to drink tea, which he himself was calmly drinking. Kate didn't understand what she should do if he didn't want to see her anymore, and how to act in this situation Kate didn't understand. While she was thinking about all this, she noticed that she had reached the center of town and saw Ron's store, and looking out the window to it, she wondered why Richard was in the boutique with him. Kate didn't understand how it was that Richard and Ron were together, and suddenly Ron noticed the girl, opened the door, and asked what brought her here. Kate. It was very disturbing that last time on her birthday, she had left suddenly and didn't even say goodbye. Ron suggested she come in and have a cup of tea. She said it was fine, and it looked like he already had company, so she would be superfluous. But Ron said he felt like a guest wouldn't mind her presence. Ron immediately said he was lonely after she dumped him that day, and Kate apologized. All of which the main character clearly didn't expect. When they entered the boutique, Ron asked Kate what kind of tea she preferred. She replied that black tea was fine and waited for Ron, who left her with Richard. Richard was pleased to see the lady and greeted her. Kate caught a glimpse of a suitcase standing with him. When she glanced at the suitcase, Richard immediately asked if she was curious about what was in it. The lady was embarrassed, and Richard said that it was clothes that my lord had entrusted him to buy for him, and he had come to Ron's boutique for that and stayed to drink tea, not even knowing that he would meet Lady Edwina here. Kate remembered Ron saying that he and my lord had met when he'd made him clothes a few times. And if you think about it that way, it all adds up. And there's nothing suspicious about Richard being here, because Ron is an incredible tailor. Richard added that such skillful men are hard to find even in the capital. Ron came in with a mug of tea and said that he was totally embarrassed by them and asked the girl to drink the tea before it got cold. Kate said that she seriously thought his clothes were unbelievable. The boy, embarrassed, thanked them, and after that there was an awkward silence. Richard decided to lighten the atmosphere and turned to the lady, apologizing that he might be rude because he wanted to ask her something. Kate allowed him to ask his question and didn't expect Ron to react to her compliment in such a way. Richard asked how she got close to my lord because although he serves him, Edwin has the most unpleasant temper. Kate replied that they weren't as close as Richard thought, and they just crossed paths a couple of times in the library. Richard had picked up on the fact that my lord spent a lot of time in the library, and as an old servant, it pleased him greatly. Since we lord had started living here, she was the first person he had invited home. The main character smiled because she was the first person to visit Edwin's house. Kate said that the tea was great, but she had to leave because she remembered that she had urgent business to attend to. But suddenly Ron stopped her and asked if there was anything he could ask her and hinted at one last favor. The girl asked what he needed. The guy pulled out a brooch inspired by a gerbera flower. Ron asked Kate to come over when she wore that brooch and that dress anytime, since he wanted to see them on her. Ron just thought the brooch would go with this dress and was looking forward to the main character's visit. Kate couldn't sleep because she had so many thoughts in her head that she couldn't even close her eyes. There had been so many different things going on lately. Richard had been very sly yesterday, and it would be wonderful to find out why he had done that. Everyone around her looked so suspicious, it just sucked all the energy out of Kate. It would have been nice to see Edwin, but she shouldn't have visited him, and it seemed old habits were stronger than she was. Kate couldn't believe that of all places she had wandered into the library, and she had a strange sense of déjà vu. It seemed that Edwin wasn't there, and Kate decided that while she was there, she would just read a book. And as she was picking something out, Kate saw Edwin's book and the bookmark that was on the page. In the book, Arthur's actions did not befit a ghost. Arthur looked pitifully at Bella, saying that it was time for him to go, and she could find happiness without him, since his fate was already sealed. And he asked Bella not to be sad every time she thought of him. The girl didn't want to let Arthur go. She couldn't be happy without him. Kate could understand Bella's feelings and realized that if Edwin died again for nothing, she wouldn't be able to bear it. Suddenly, there was a voice behind her asking if Kate had called out to him. Turning back, Kate saw that Edwin was there, saying that she was really doing things her way.